This is why I don't fuck with Glocks, right? It's not even specifically the Glock itself. It's the fanboys and amount of uneducated people that rush to it due to it simply being popular without doing their research. That to me is the biggest issue. You getting a gun because it's cool, even though you don't know shit about it, the benefits of it, don't have no understanding of ergonomics, not willing to put forth any training or making sure that you're overall good with a gun and think that you damn near have a superpower just because it's a Glock. That is the wrong way of thinking. There is no firearm on earth that you should be carrying that makes you feel superhuman or give you John Wayne syndrome. In other words, make you feel like you're more capable of doing more harm or overestimate your capabilities due to you having a firearm or just overall being unrealistic with what you can do. There's been people who I've met in real life that when they seemingly get like a switch or an extension, for some odd reason they get this idea that they're invincible. And I feel like that has a lot to do with how it's portrayed in media. You see it mostly rapped about in the rappers' music videos. That's one of the most popular handguns for people to mention when it comes to the overall crime scene, or how the guns that mostly portrayed to look cool in movies and for the policemen. And I think people need to realize when you're talking about Glock and how proficient it is that you can't listen to a person who says something like that. A gun is only as proficient as the shooter. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm gonna show pictures and videos of me shooting and messing with these guns to let you know that I'm talking from experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I am wrong, I'll just put that with the picture. I've been in possession of and shot of Glock 45, Glock 19, Glock 43, Glock 43X, Glock 17, and I believe Glock 42, which is the 380 version, 6+1. And what I could tell you based off of what I've researched and from experience, that there's overall not too much to complain about, but there most definitely is a lot to complain about, but they're overhyped. For one example, one thing that the typical person that doesn't do research will say something such as, it's simple, or it's nothing but a polymer flame pistol that's just as simple as you can get it. And to me, that let me know that the person hasn't done a lot of research on weapons. This is a Burst of Thunder 380 in front of you, right? The part that I don't get is most guns overall, including the Burst of Thunder in front of you and the Glock itself, got most of its ergonomics from a 1911, which means the safety is either on the left or right side, just like most guns in general, at the back end of the slide, as it's always been on a 1911. And that's pretty much it. After you know how to pull a trigger and at most know the difference between fire, striker, and double single action pistols and single actions, you pretty much don't need to learn much else. There's nothing quote unquote that makes it so simple to the point that it just outright beats other pistols or quote unquote make it better. If you believe a Glock is the most simple out there, I don't think you overall know too much about guns in general. And I'm just telling the truth. What is so quote unquote simple about just having a magazine release? You know what I'm saying? Is that even a good thing? What is the downsides of carrying a gun with the safety? Some Glocks do have that, but for some odd reason, a lot of the Glock fanboys are against that, despite its light triggers and the continuous way it's always carried incorrectly. A lot of the Glock fanboys love to tuck them in their pockets, hoodies with no holsters, or even if their pants pointed at their, let's say, ding-dong, which is also another complaint that I've also come across with other Glock fanboys. A lot of them are also, they don't feel as safe to carry it due to the light trigger pull, which is also another problem. Why is somebody who not used to guns or overall just trying to get used to guns in terms of concealed carrying and practicing with it is given a light trigger gun? It's sad to say, but a lot of people that do get guns for their popularity and don't do a lot of training with them, for some odd reason have a problem, quote unquote, with negligent discharges, which means the guns could shoot accidentally or by itself. They have a history of jamming, especially with their extensions, not with their normal size mag or the mags they come with, in other words. But But a lot of people don't know that every time you put in an extension, it increases the likelihood of a gun jamming by 33%. And I'll show the screenshot for that as well. And you would think that this would somehow get around to the gun community, but it just hasn't for some odd reason. That also let me know it's a big gap of people who also aren't doing their research. And a lot of the people in the 2A community that post things on YouTube don't even post too much about it or overall tell you a lot about all the changes that you can make to it. That's one of the reasons why I love the Glock. And when I say love, I don't mean as if it's my top brand. I honestly don't have a top brand despite whatever gun that I may show on this camera. A Glock has so many modifications to the point that you can make it to your perfect gun, but for some odd reason, no one does that despite their lack of training. You can switch the triggers, you can switch the grips, you can switch the sights, you could switch the magazine capacity, and with some, you don't even have to switch the size of the magazine. For example, there was a 15 round mag for the Glock 43X that you overall don't have to do much to. You know, and it doesn't get too much bigger, and it's not long enough to the point where you have to be as worried compared to a longer extension, because the longer the extension, typically the bigger issues with the Glocks that I hear that you're going to come across, the less you'll have to worry about it jamming as long as it's closer to the original size. Like, for example, a Glock 26, you put a +2 on there, it may not have too many issues. You know what I'm saying? I still think that's a reliable firearm. But the reliability, when I say reliability, to most new shooters is not reliable. When you're practicing the basic 4, and one of the basic 4 rules of making sure that you don't shoot anyone or firearm safety is to keep your fingers off the trigger. Like I said, when a lot of people get these Glocks, they overestimate their capabilities. A lot of people overall in general have not been across in a situation where they had to go grab a gun or, you know, carry it in a way for self-defense, or even practice quickly reholstering and drawing them, or don't even feel safe to do that with a loaded chamber. When you see professionals or people in the gun community on YouTube channel, that may be a different story, which, you know, obviously makes more sense compared to the average person who's not thinking to put in as much training just to carry something just to defend themselves. Which I also understand why, you know, while somebody going to day-to-day, you know, work back and forth, they may not have the same perspective or think they need as much training as the YouTuber. But, you know, as I would honestly say, is that you're wrong, because no matter what type of gun you have, if you're not proficient with it, despite how weak or strong the caliber is, quote unquote, you're gonna have to make sure that you're proficient. Without the proficiency, there's no point of holding a gun. You're just as dead with it as you are without it for the most part. Unless you're come across something where a criminal most likely to run away just because you simply have it. But a lot of times they fight back. The issues I have with the triggers: 1, if you're a new shooter, please switch the trigger. It is way too light. It's typically just like how you see this double single actions out here in the middle with a 12-pound trigger pull that I could drop, lean on it, don't even have to worry about the trigger even being pushed out of place, and go about my day-to-day and not have to worry about it shooting on myself. One of the problems I hear the most with Glock fanboys, and this is a problem they typically get afterwards, is if you couldn't research the gun, which lets me know that they're not doing a lot of research on the gun, is the light trigger. One of the people on this channel, he was just on it with the Glock 43X. You know, I don't like not having one in the chamber. I personally believe if you got a gun or need a gun without holding one in the chamber, you already putting yourself at too much at a disadvantage from the get-go. It may personally help him through a lot of situations, and plus we've personally trained with it, so he could be obviously, you know, good based off of how well he could keep situational awareness. We already had a long conversation about that. I already explained in good detail what would be the disadvantages and advantages of carrying that way. But if you're carrying a gun that you don't feel comfortable putting one in a chamber, that is another way of you damn near saying, I could predict whatever situation that I'm going to be in, that I could get out, despite how quick or efficient the robber or criminal or the aggressor may be. I'll tell you from experience, Not everybody that gets robbed can see it coming. And I know, you have situational awareness because you most likely have a gun. For those who typically keep up that situational awareness or have the mind state to keep it up, this may be less of an issue with it. So you may be able to have to, overall just let it go. But if you cannot carry one in a chamber, you're at a major disadvantage. Let me just give you a few examples, right? Let's say someone breaks into the house at night. When they hear you rack that slide, let's just say it's a 50-50 chance that they don't run away. So let's say they don't run away, right? They know exactly who you are. Shit, God forbid they're too familiar with it, because, most people can't be too familiar with a weapon to only know what it is just from you sliding a rack. But I'll tell you, based off of what the news is saying, a lot of these criminals typically run 2 Glocks, so they're probably familiar. And not only that, I'd have to say also, when you're out running about in public, you can't predict the dude who spotted you coming around a corner, that runs up on you. You don't have the time to up and slide a rack in. By then, it's already too late. You're already at too much of a risk, and by the time you successfully pull it out, you could end up risk. So for robberies and home defense, you're already at a disadvantage depending on the situations, because you're most likely going to be broken in at night, which could, have them listening out for things and you sliding that rack. Just like if you were to put one in a chamber of a pump action shotgun, it could end up giving up your location and giving you a disadvantage when it comes to fighting yourself and quickly drawing, because you need every quick second that you have that you're putting the racks in, because that could be a second that you're potentially getting shot at, or just overall already deleted, or sent to heaven early just based off of that mistake. If you don't believe me, let me know in the comments. I'll send videos and I'll post shorts of it. Or a long enough beaver tail to make sure you don't get any slide bite, or to make sure when you do quickly get it out the holster, it doesn't feel misplaced or weird in your hand, which I'm not saying is always a bad thing, because you can also do well with a gun that does feel weird in your hand. But a lot of them, for some odd reason, have very small beaver tails, or for lack of better words, the curve at the back of the gun right here. For those of y'all who don't know the importance of it, that makes sure is that your hand doesn't get behind the slide, so it doesn't shoot potentially while your hand's behind it. I know the Glocks, they have a plate at the back, so if your thumb is behind it, it can't fire, which is real similar to a hammer. I can't really get too much into that because it's not really too much of a problem. But once again, that's just to educate the Glock fanboys, because there's a lot of people around here in the state of Georgia who carry this gun simply because it's popular. And then when you go to asking them questions about it or overall guns, a lot of them don't know nothing about it. The sights. Glocks have a blocky sight. And what I mean by that is, once you align the sights, typically you can't see around or in between it. You have to look directly over. The problem I have with that is it takes longer to align the sights, which a lot of people just don't get, that could obviously be a problem depending on how you're, maybe not in a self-defense situation, but I'll say when it comes to training, that's, once again, that's not a problem I could get too much into, because once again, those are able to be switched. But for the Glock fanboys who don't do their research or on guns, or not really all that interested in modifying it into whatever type of gun to make it perfect in your hands, that's something I want for you to keep in tail. And also the beaver tails can also be switched out as well though too. The grips, in other words, could be switched out on a gun. The Glock as well too. And for some odd reason, the safety modification on there for Glock is just a problem. I don't know why. I don't know why Glock fanboys hate having a safety on a gun, as if that makes it less safe. You don't like a safety, don't use it. But that's something that I would advise towards beginners, just because the way how the gun is designed with a light trigger, it's a way higher chance of you having a negligent discharge. And I know a lot of people like to pull out it has a dual trigger. And for the ones that have the longer trigger pulls, like the 19, for example, that could obviously work wonders. I'm not talking about every Glock when I say that. But my problem is that, yeah, we do know it. It's a precaution to make sure that the gun doesn't go off unless your hand is in the trigger. But first off, I could tell you from experience, and you could do your research, and no matter how good this influencer is or person that you're listening to at shooting guns, I can guarantee you at one point, especially in the heat of the moment when you may actually have to pull it out for self-defense, that they have always, or not even most likely, I promise you, I could bet money with you that it always has been 100% chance that their hand at one point or another has slid to that trigger, whether they wanted it to or not. Another thing too that I don't like about Glock fanboys, for some odd reason, despite the other guns that's been selling just about as much, and when I mean just about as much, I'm talking about specific models like the SIG P365. There's even a DB9 who was outselling, which is real funny to me, outselling a lot of the other Glocks is also being discontinued. And that's not even just to compare to Glocks, but other guns in general. Are they relevant and are they good guns, Glocks? That, to me, that's dependent on who you are. If you're not that well of a shooter and you're not planning on putting that much training or even thinking about looking towards modifications for it, if you're coming across issues or see them as a safety risk, then no, you shouldn't be fucking with it, and you need to stay away from other Glock fanboys because they're only gonna tell you that their gun is the best due to lack of knowledge or John Wayne syndrome or feeling like the quote-unquote cool kid part of the group, you know? Outside of that and the negative stereotypes that's pushed with the guns, with the Glock specifically, I think that's about it. See y'all next video.